Now it should be. Ooh, it actually works. That's amazing. Don't you like it when things? I think we should be streaming now. I'm going to check. But don't you like it when things work?
Yeah.
I find that
It's great.
I find it delightful. What I need to do is let me turn off. This is another thing. You should ask your kids if this is true, but I'm pretty sure that when you're doing live streaming, you have to narrate technical things that you're doing. You know what I mean?
Oh, you do.
Yeah. So I had a problem with my headphones, the monitor, to hear myself talking. Too much of a delay, so I just figured out how to go turn that off through the OBS studio. I recommend Audio Hijack for a way to monitor yourself. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn that on right now, Rick, to burn valuable time. What it's been a couple of days since we've spoken. What I see you're not in Amsterdam anymore.
This is Amsterdam. That's the Rijksmuseum.
Oh yeah, it is. Oh, I miss going to the Rijks. I used to just you have to schedule to go there, and so now I've only been there a few times, and it's nice. You can just go there and wander around, kind of see what's happening. It's a good place. I really like the Rijks. How often did you go there?
Um, when we lived there and
Yeah.
lived, this far from it, that would be never. But
Ah,
I've been there before. We've been there before.
yeah, yeah.
We
But you
should have,
didn't.
it's we left in such a hurry
Uh huh.
when all the COVID stuff hit that we didn't do a lot of the things that we meant to do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Van Gogh Museum, though, and the Modern Art Museum that they have, we went and saw that. So we did do some museuming,
Yes.
but we didn't get back to the Rijksmuseum.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun to go in there and just like I have a Friends of the Reichs music. I can never pronounce anything, and one day I should learn. Anyways, you can just go there at any time, and you don't have to schedule to go to the special exhibits, which is nice. But it's good to just casually walk around, enjoy yourself, go check out some old furniture, some artwork, whatever sort of wackiness you might be into.
The
But
Vermeers, I like Vermeers. When I saw them the first time, I was amazed. So I try to see them wherever I can.
yeah, that is good stuff. Well, having nothing to do with the Dutch masters that I know of. So last time, we talked expansively about all sorts of Kubernetes stuff, and I kind of forced us into discussing there's this enterprise architecture implicit in Kubernetes that I think is fun to contemplate and think about. I was just reading we being the VMware Tanzu people, we did a state of spring survey, and I was finally reading the slides for that because the next Tanzu Talk recording we have here on Monday is going to be I'm going to talk. Rita and I are going to talk with some people about that. So I like to do a little bit of homework, but it was occurring to me that I don't quite know the connection, just to pick up from last time, but I think there's a pretty strong explanation to be made about how all of this tooling that you have, for example, in Spring Boot and other Spring stuff, kind of follows along of this implied Kubernetes architecture, which I think is a good proof point of that, right? There's all the ways of doing health checks and all these other things are just directly put into Spring Boot, which I don't know. Maybe that's a nice example to pull out at some point.
I mean, calling it the Kubernetes architect. I mean, it's cloud native, man. But
That's
somehow we've replaced the word. I guess it's like calling a tissue Kleenex. Is that?
yeah. What do you think of that cloud native phrase? What's your position on that?
I don't dislike it as much as I dislike some other phrases. I dislike the phrase enterprise more. I usually when you talk about enterprise architecture, I replace it with the word legacy.
Yes.
Enterprise database, legacy database.
Okay.
Has just enough, so it makes me like an angsty teenager, a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But it also gets it, I don't mind cloud native. I mean, it is, to be honest, I think cloud native has little to do with cloud, but it's because of cloud, right?
Right.
So there were
right.
when AWS started, there were limitations, right? They wouldn't guarantee you something would stay up and running. And software up to that point was designed to be dumb. The infrastructure had to stay up, and stay up and running. You spent lots of money making everything very redundant, so that your infrastructure never went down. Of course, as we all know, any of us that worked, on IT,
Yeah.
it always went down.
Sure.
So, and then the applications failed because the applications weren't smart. So it's really because of cloud, because of the limitations, we came up with an architecture that's actually better and it's more resilient. Having the applications be smarter, having the applications know, instead of assuming the infrastructure will never go down. And you saw that play out with some of the things Netflix did, right? I mean, you assume things are going to go down. In fact, you take them down on purpose, right? Make your developers get used to that.
Yeah. This is only tangentially related, but every now and then, since there are those of us who have been around for a while, I think it's worth like, let's go look through the archives. Remind us, as you alluded to, how reliable slash unreliable public cloud stuff was, and what the deal with that was. And like, let's say 2010 or so, like when you were in the when you were, in the heat of the working on like cloud server things and stuff like that, what was the understanding of the nines of cloud back then?
Well, there were a bunch of nines. It just was never the first number guaranteed. So I tell you what, it was. I mean, they just made no promises. I actually, in my experience, I did a lot of, I mean, we have to really go back to like 2007 when I started. We were at the beginning of some of the cloud stuff. It really wasn't that unreliable. It just didn't promise to be reliable.
Yeah.
And so it didn't meet the basic requirements that most enterprises, legacy,
Yes.
most enterprise architectures require. They require a certain number of nines for infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it didn't meet that. So, but there's, if you build it and build it cheap enough, people will find a way to use it. I think it's a great story on people being on ingenuity and making do with what you have. And we ended up with something I think that's far, far, far better. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been involved in disasters, but a disaster as far as DR. So I'm not talking about something too bad,
Right.
death or anything, but just you lose a SAN,
Right.
and you have your other SAN on another part of the country, and it's supposed to fail over. I've been in 3 situations that were catastrophic to the applications, and one of them failed over correctly. However, it didn't fail back correctly. Like there's this. I've always said that things that you do often, you do well, and if you test failing over your SAN every 6 months, or failing over anything every 6 months, when it happens, you're not going to be good at it, right? So you should be doing this stuff every day,
frequently, right?
It's really, it's one of the arguments that I use when I talk about CI/CD and actually deploying code. If you do this stuff 10 times a day, you're really, really good at it. When I had a team that first deployed PCF, we tiled that thing and rebuilt it every day for a year before we went live. So
Yeah.
by the time, you're good at things you do well.
You're
good at things you do often.
I forget which book this is from. It's I feel like there's probably like 20 years of like airport books that have been discredited by the what is it in the social sciences, the replicability problem. I can't talk. I need some more some tea. But there's this one about, I think it's one of those building habits books, and the whole point of it is that the way that many athletes build habits is they do the same things daily, like the sort of rituals of how they do things. And I remember there was one, whatever this profile was of Michael Phelps. And it was like every time before he jumps into the pool, he has the same like 20 or 30-minute routine that he does. Like not routine, but like, series of things. It's kind of like the people who always have to wear like, the lucky socks for baseball or whatever. Like, and then that starts to become important, kind of a little, sort of like you're saying that if you follow these same routines and you've done this stuff a million times, when it comes to the high pressure situation of it being real, you're just like, yeah, I mean, this is what I do 20 times a day. There's just a bunch of people yelling at the moment, whatever, right? Like it's more stressful when I'm not doing this than when I'm doing it because I'm used to it, which I think, I don't know. I find in let's say skills that I have, like podcasting, I guess, or writing things, or pretending like I know what I'm talking about in meetings. I've done all of that so many times that it's not too stressful. And I get kind of stressed out when I'm not doing it. But I think they call that in DevOps lore the game day you're supposed to have. And then there's probably something about safety culture that I should reference or know about, but I don't know. Anyhow, so you were saying since last time you've been thinking about this idea of uncloud nativeness. Now that we've talked about swimming and cloud native. And I like that idea. Like there were always a lot of nines. There was just never a guarantee about what the first number was.
Yeah.
As many nines as you want, as long as you don't have to say
Yes.
what the first one is.
The first one's an 8,
That's
maybe.
right. But what is this? What's this concept of uncloud nativeness?
So for me, uncloud nativeness is giving your is when you have enough flexibility to apply your existing enterprise legacy processes, services to the things you're trying to make cloud native. A good example, and I'm going to mention a product here that will probably make people angry if they love it. I admin this years ago. Tivoli Access Manager, right? It's Tivoli Access Manager does web security for a lot of companies, a lot of banks, and it is built for a 3-tier system. It is not built to be dynamically scaled, to have your apps dynamically scaled. It's not built for that. But in many companies, especially financial institutions, that's their way. This is our way of doing it. This is bank A's way. We've been doing it this way forever. And their default mindset is, oh, we have a new architecture. Well, let's see how we can cram our existing enterprise things into it. And what you end up with is something that doesn't provide the value that you want to get, and you dug yourself a big giant hole. Bigger if you've done a lot of custom integration to get this enterprise stuff to work. So that to me is uncloud nativeness. Is that you lost sight of the reason you were doing this. If you ever knew you had the reason for doing this, you might be doing it because CIO magazine said to do it. But if you had a reason, which should have been so that you can be more agile, so you can react to things like this COVID-19 pandemic we have. The way that companies have to communicate with their customers changed overnight. Like, if you're a grocery store, you went from having your customers come in to having them go to an app and order things. And that means that your inventory system has to be good enough to be up to date. And, I think in many cases it wasn't. Now, there were certain companies who I won't name, but some of them are our customers, the good ones. And that they prepared for this stuff ahead of time. They didn't know this was going to happen, but they prepared to be agile. They prepared to be able to quickly make changes and move things to production. And they were able to adjust. And it's and I'm not really talking about um, technical agility. Technical agility only exists so that you can have business agility, because without business agility, technical agility doesn't matter. Like, it's so that you can adjust your business to survive when there's a crisis or a change or some, potential disruption. Is it you? Are you the one viewer? Are you viewing us? Yeah. Hi, Yana, if you listen to this. Mm. It's the doomsday prepping of the enterprise. Yes. Yes, do that. And mention us when you talk to your salesperson. Yeah, yeah, you don't, I mean, you don't even know what it is. It's about being able to respond quickly, right? It's about being able to being sure that you are able to turn your business. And it's actually wonderful because we've been saying this for a long time of, that there needs to be this existential pressure driving you to transform. But now we have an example of it. And we're seeing companies like, you put up Kroger, which is actually the grocery store I was thinking of, that does it right. And customer people like retailers like Home Depot that have adjusted very, very quickly, and they are thriving and doing better in this difficult time. So yeah, you need to be able to adjust to anything. I mean, it's not even necessarily disaster; it could just be competition.
Yeah.
Like, the thing everyone's afraid of: Amazon is coming into your market. You need to be ready for that, right? If you're not, if you're one of those companies, and they're coming for everyone. There's going to be Amazon Prime cement mixing soon. They're going to be everything.
Yeah, prime cement mixing. Very nice. So back to the what you were saying. I think if I understand your concept of uncloud nativeness, it's basically you get these new, I guess, literally containers to run your workloads in, to run your IT goop in, your software, your apps, your processes, whatever. And instead of changing what your workloads are to take advantage of the efficiencies and the new you've always got efficiencies and the new capabilities that you have, you just sort of like keep your workloads the same, and
Well,
you run them
I wouldn't
there.
even say it's necessarily about workloads. So people, quite often there lots of people are talking about workloads, but what's not spoken about enough is processes and policies.
Right.
So yeah, one of the things you start to see is security. Like, we have this rule about firewall rules. Well, when you've got a service mesh and you've got application networks, then the role of a firewall is different. And if you don't adjust your policies and your processes with, cognizant of that, then you're not doing something modern. You're potentially digging a hole and actually removing some of the value that you'd get, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
That's interesting. It's like not only should you not lift and shift actual bits or software or workloads, but it's probably a bad idea to lift and shift governance, right? Like when you move to a different platform, it's very much worth your while to revisit the governance stuff. I was listening to Beyond the Phoenix Project, which is sort of like Gene Kim and John Willis's lecture series with each other about DevOps stuff from about I think 2017, and they brought up a story about, is her name Nicole? I forget she's sort of like one of the Target people who has spoke a lot. I don't know if she still does about DevOps at Target, the big American retailer with. Is that Spuds McKinsey that they have? It's not a Spuds McKinsey dog. It's a different type of
yeah,
dog.
it's a Staffordshire Terrier, American Stafford. It's that same kind of dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or is it like or is it one of the other kind of terriers? I don't know. It's a white dog.
I was told by some Target people I was talking with once that they give out like versions of that dog as like kind of like rewards and like little, not rewards, but sort of like occasional gifts.
Like live dogs?
No, little stuffed animal dogs. They give them out as like of like internal handouts and goodies and stuff, right? So the longer you're there, the more of these dogs you have, and you can be like, oh, that's the 2011, corporate statue commemorative dog, or anyways, which is fun. But so they were going over her story, and she she had this award on her desk that was like the Life Achievement Award for eliminating, I forget what it was called, the TAP meeting. And then someone had asked her what that was, and she said, "Oh, when we used to have these two architectural review meetings, or this two-step process if you wanted to introduce a new technology. And the first one was that you had to, put in a request to this review board that was architects and operations people explaining why you should have a meeting to introduce this. Then you had to go to the meeting to kind of argue with them, and in a argue in so much as like they want to battle test it. I don't know what's the non-negative version of argument where you're proving your case. Is it just argument? But it's
there must be a better word, but yeah, it's not
right. It's just like you need to make a persuasive presentation with them asking questions about how about this and how about that.
Linguistically, that's an apology. So the word
Yes.
apology doesn't actually mean to say you're sorry, but you can
Yeah,
but
and
no one understands if you use it that way.
yeah. And anyways, so this is a very onerous process, and she went through it and like for whatever she wanted to do. And then afterwards, she sent a whole lot of emails, and she was like, "Why do we do these meetings? I don't want anyone that works for me or with me to ever have to go through this experience again because it's time consuming and horrendous." And then in doing all this pestering, people found out that like they weren't really sure why they did these meetings. Like there was no like they thought maybe like 15 or 20 years ago there was some problems that they had and they introduced these meetings, but like there was really no like existing charter or proof point. It was just sort of like that's how we do things. And so that long shaggy Dags dog story, and all of a sudden I'm Brad Pitt in that movie. Like you like Dags. And it's sort of like someone forklifted all this governance over and forgot to like see if they actually needed to do it or not, which is that's a thrilling
it's funny.
concept.
Some of this governance, these policies, these processes, they become tradition and they kind of become canonized. And that is part of the problem. Like I was working at a financial institution trying to do transformation, and I had to fight the process of creating a very large document with a Visio spreadsheet that you sent to an architectural review board before you could commit code. And it's the same sort of thing, right? That you see those things everywhere because things were much more permanent, in legacy world. So if you made a mistake, it was significant, and you probably didn't have shared hardware. So you spent $5 million buying hardware for this thing. So if it was wrong, if there was a big problem, then it was a significant cost and there was risk to it. I mean, there's a high cost of failure. One of the great things about cloud computing, cloud native processes and development and the infrastructure around it is that you lower the cost of failure, right? So that's an important thing.
So is this, and I don't mean this to sound like in a arrogant way, but I'm always trying to adjust the conversations I have. Is that a point you find yourself making when you're talking with people a lot? That point being, we have these new technologies which allow you to revisit your assumptions about how you're operating. Like, does that come up a lot in conversations you have?
Yes. But only because I bring it up. I mean, it's not, no one else does.
Yeah. But people like sort of realize it when you go over it, right? I mean, that was
I would say no. Like
no?
Sometimes they dig in. Like there is when I say it becomes tradition, especially if it's the kind of company where people stay for 15 or 20 years, they are there's a couple of reasons. One is vendors sort of indoctrinate you into their way of doing things, right?
Yes.
There's an Oracle way of doing things. There's a Cisco way of doing things, and they use terminology, and you end up with people fighting with that's their known world. It's like their religion. I just see a dog. Speaking of dogs.
Oh yeah, that's probably my dog back there.
Yeah, it's sort of.
Hopefully it's my dog.
It's like religion, and that's what I found is that you end up in these religious arguments that you shouldn't. Like there's a new way of doing things. But what I found is useful, is that is to ask the questions in a different way. When I come in and include people very, very, very early. Some of the mistakes I've made. One big mistake I made one time was not including like a key network architect in some of the early modernization discussions.
Mm.
And so what I did is by excluding him is make him be difficult to me because he didn't understand. But security I included at the beginning, and instead of talking about what process and policies they had, I drew out a proposed architecture and I said, what controls do we need for this? Let's think about what we would need in this new environment. And it was, they enjoyed it. It was refreshing for all of us, and we were able to rethink the processes and policies that way. If you do things on the back end, they're just going to apply the standard way of doing things. And
Oh,
you're
oh,
gonna,
you mean the
yeah,
back end, as in if we use
the back end, yes,
further down the timeline of the project.
yes,
So yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
which is I think because the way people feel, especially about security, is they don't want to involve them. But if you treat them as your allies and people that can help you, and not as the enemy hurdle that you have to get over, then things go better. That ends up being, I mean, those are the processes and policies that are most difficult to change. Um, but they're the ones that need to be changed the most usually, because the environment and the paradigm is different. I mean, not only could you slow down your your modernization efforts, not only could you erase some of the value, but you could also end up being less secure than you could be if you rethought your processes and policies and rethought those controls.
Yeah, yeah, and in order to do that, in order to do that, you need to involve the people who are in charge of that, right? Like I keep hesitating because the language I get too wrapped up in the interpersonal communication, empathy stuff with a lot of this, right? And but it does seem like this is one of the things that I think in the DevOps world that they learned over the years is like, if you're nice to people, you can deploy your code. Right? Like, which is a really simplified way of putting it, but to your point, right? Like, if by talking to a network admin, like from the start, you're being nice to them and respectful and kind of like, not trying to be snarky and subversive and just dumping a bunch of stuff on them at the end. And so therefore you're going to be able to deploy your code, right? And it's just sort of like, there's almost like, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think in ITIL, there's a golden rule. There's just like, there's also a lot of good stuff in ITIL, but the way that people think of IT service management, I'm never sure if there's kind of a treat people with respect, or treat people like you would like to be treated. Certainly,
There should be, though.
certainly, the people who audit my expenses don't follow the golden rule. I think that is that's the case. But yeah, that is like, I've been thinking about a new, as O'Reilly would call it, report, or as everyone else in the world would call it, book. That I want to work on, and I kind of rambled about this to you recently, but I'm thinking of calling it like mind shift, and it's all about like the way you change your thinking, not so much your tactics. And I think that's a good one of like, you should be friendly with people, and it's almost like I can imagine the writing of this is like, another thing that I see people doing is they're more friendly and empathetic with people, and then there's a paragraph break, and it's like, now hold on. I know that's stating the obvious, but let me tell you what that means, right? That means like proactively going out to these people that you're fearing are going to slow you down and that you think will be opposed to you, and just being like, hey, you should come join us, right? Like, trying to bring them into the fold instead of battling against them or coding around them, which I feel like in enterprise IT, it's a really hard battle to eliminate a gatekeeper, and it's a lot easier.
It's impossible, and it comes back to bite you. Like, so in the situation with the network, the like principal network architect, or distinguished network architect, whatever he was, he held the IP addresses. So in the end, there had to be a reckoning, right? And it would have been better if I had included him from the beginning. But it's not just being nice. Being nice gets you a long way, but understanding what motivates the people.
Right.
Understanding motivation. Like, some people are motivated by making sure they get the respect they do. Some people are motivated by making sure they get their bonuses. Some people are motivated by learning new technologies. But understanding the motivations of all the different the people in the IT silos. I mean, one of the things cloud native is about It's about breaking down those silos,
Mm.
and those silos are cultural and they're difficult to break down. So, you have to understand the motivations of the people you're dealing with, and everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good because that is. I'm always obsessed with the difference between getting better at software in large enterprises, let's call them large organizations, and then like the Netflix culture deck and
Mm.
Spotify and whatever, like all those things. And some of those companies are old enough now that they sort of are bumping up against those things. But I think just to explicitly draw it out, that is one major difference when you're looking to transform how these
Mm.
organizations do software. Is there is a lot of initial and ongoing work, as you were just describing, in discovering the status quo. And not only the status quo of how things operate, but as you say, the motivations that people have, who all the players are, and
Mm-hmm.
how you have to work with them and do things. You can't just sort of like do things. Right? Like you have to actually go work with other people, and unless there's always the initial cases, right, of the mavericks and the people who can go off and do skunk works and things like that. But even in that case, when those teams come back, or even if they don't come back, when you want to scale those improvements to the rest of the organization, you're right back at the beginning, right?
People that those sort of skunk works, running off, doing it all on your own. Those are some of the biggest failures I've seen of people trying to modernize their application infrastructure. Is that they don't include anyone. They go off and do it. They have some pure vision of what they want it to be, but then it's never used, and it ends up dying, withering away and dying.
Mm. So I've done a good job moving us into the optimistic, happy world of statements about how things should be, and the quicksand you don't want to step in. But how can people navigate this stuff? Do you got any tips or tactics? Like we came to one,
Mhm.
find the people, that the gatekeepers that you don't want to talk to, and go talk to them, and it's probably going to be cool, right? Like just kind of understand what their deal is, and figure out how you can make their life better. Like, and I would almost suggest, it's the way I think about it in my experience. It's like, don't even think about how you can make their role better. Think about how, as an individual, you can make their life better, right? Like
Mm.
whether that is achieving whatever goals they have in order to make more money, or keep their job if everyone's getting like shown the door right or left, or make them happier, or whatever that individual person bound by their skin, like whatever it is they like, find out what they like and show them how working with you is going to make them happier or better. And that I mean, I think every corporate meeting I've pretty much had, that's the tool you use. Never mind what the chart says you should do. It's just, how does it benefit the people that you want an alliance with?
Well, that's one. So that we were talking about these interpersonal things, but you asked what
Yeah,
other
yeah, yeah.
tips I have. And one, I think that I mean, I've run up against this so much, is that have a goal. Have a, I mean, I know that sounds kind of stupid, but and you think you shouldn't have to say it, but if you have a purpose, if you have a direction and a destination, then it's pretty easy to stay on course towards it, right? If you start to stray, you can say, well, there's the North Star. I'm going back to that. But what I see is, and this is part of the problem with the uncloud nativeness in Kubernetes, is that
Yeah.
their goal is Kubernetes. Well, that's not a business goal,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, we talked earlier about the goal is to be resilient, to be agile, business agility, right? And if you define that well and have a good target, that's fine. If your goal is Kubernetes, then you could create a beast of something that does no good, and doesn't help you at all.
Right,
And
right,
and
right.
and I think I see that a lot. I see that it's sort of like a few years ago, every CEO was going into China, whether it made sense or not, because if he didn't, he had to explain to his board of directors why he wasn't trying to do business in China. And
Right.
right now, every CIO is trying to do Kubernetes, whether they know why they need to do it or not, because that's what you do. And we talked about this before. The average tenure of a CIO is 18 months. So they need that on their resume for their next CIO job, right? So you have to do Kubernetes. But if you do it without a purpose, without a goal, without vision, I mean, then it's probably going to fail. Almost
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
going to fail.
yeah.
I mean,
No,
because you don't know where you're going, right?
yeah, no. That is good. That's something.
And
I
then
th-
if you don't have a vision, if you're not looking at it that way, why not stick all your old enterprise tools in it?
yeah,
Why
yeah.
not make people do the same processes and policies, right? Because it's in the end, you've achieved your goal of Kubernetes.
There you.
Kubernetes. I don't know.
Oh, let me write that one in. Kuber nuttiness. I I wonder if anyone's ever said that. Yeah, yeah. So what what else? You got any other tactics to throw out there? So how do you make sure you're doing cloud nativeness and not uncloud nativeness?
um, so that's a good. I hadn't, I think it doesn't. The labels don't matter.
Mm,
Like but what matters is the goals, right? Is achieving your goals. Now I say things are uncloud native because I have very specific opinions. I'm very opinionated and I know what I want it to be.
right.
But in the end, if you're a company and you have a good goal, it's whatever you need to achieve that goal. And hopefully you've hired good executives that have vision and can help the company prepare for the future. Um, but yeah, I don't think it has to be. I think it's okay as long as you know what you're doing. We talked about digging holes, to dig a little hole that you can get out of, right? It's okay to accept it. That would be sort of accepting technical debt because for a reason, right? That's digging a hole. Like I'm I'm cloud native, but everything's talking back to this Oracle rack cluster, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't done anything with my data, but I know that. I know that that's something I need to do later, but this still meets my goals for the next 3 years while we worry about that. So I think that making sure it meets your needs and knowing your needs because you have goals and vision.
So okay. So to go to a parallel, does orthogonal mean completely not related, or just when do people say orthogonal anymore? I felt like there was this time in nerd culture where that word
There
was used all
was,
the time,
yeah.
and it
I,
was
I did
really
not. I
annoying.
did not use it. Yeah, it was really
Yeah,
tangential.
yeah.
Can you use?
So in a different area related to that, right? So another line of thinking out loud. I've almost forgotten what it is, but I'm chasing after it in the darkness of my babbling here. So oh, I know what it was. So a lot of the conversation that I hear and participate in about, I'll just say it, digital transformation has to do with, like, I'm going to reduce it down just to be brief, knowing what you're doing, right? Like, now that's a very unhelpful short way of putting it, but for example, you should have a goal. Why are you doing this thing, right? Like, we're doing this, I'm just, to increase customer service because, like, that is going to allow us to survive or to make more money or whatever, right? Like, this is why stuff like the COVID stuff is, it aside, but it has all these side effects that are very interesting for, I think, people like you and I who study people improving stuff. Is like, the goal was like, we need to be able to approve loans now. Or like, I was in one of our executive sessions earlier this week, and we were going over these things, and there was one pharmaceutical company that was like, we had a bunch of, like, clinical test patients that were in clinical trials, and all of a sudden they couldn't go see their doctor. So that's a problem we had to solve, right? Like, and stuff like that over and over again. Or like the one that Yana's gone over with Tesco Bank is, we have a ton of call center people who now can't go to the call center. So we got to solve that problem, like, quick. So you have all those forcing functions to drive a clear goal, right? Like, and if you go see her, like, her spring one talk and the webinar she did with Barely O'Reilly, that's one of they would agree exactly with what you're saying, is like, the crisper, more narrow goal you're going to have, the easier it will be to do everything, because people will just know to do it, right? Like, they know what's up. So going all the way back up, with a lot of digital transformation, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to kind of know what's happening. But this makes me wonder, so if you are in management, starting with upper middle management and executive management, how do you make sure you don't become a micromanager that has no time to do anything? Because you're spending all your time knowing that, like, well, I know we haven't converted the data warehouse over, but that's because we're on the wrong version of Kafka, and we've got to upgrade the Kafka. And, like, you could go on and know all this stuff. Whereas, like, really, in this straw person situation, like, as a senior executive, you shouldn't really know that stuff in enough detail to, like, talk about it, right? Like,
Well,
there's
you might know it, but
right.
you shouldn't be driving it. I mean, so I'm a strong believer in executive management setting vision based on business problems, and then letting the people underneath come with the solutions to it.
Right. No, that's a good distinction. So definitely you might know it, but, like, at some point you cross a line in getting too involved in that kind of stuff. And there's a different version where it's like you have an organization that is the one that gets involved, and you're kind of cool delegating that stuff. But that, in my mind, that's kind of in contradiction, or it's in, like, potential contradiction to this idea of, like, you should know what you're doing. Right? Like, there's some balance between, like, knowing what you're doing and, like, it's not my job to know every single thing that's happening.
It is. It's the difference between managing a baseball team and calling the pitches, right? I mean, it's a baseball manager knows everything about baseball. He knows everything about his players, and he makes high level decisions about who's pitching. But he doesn't say throw a 98-mile-an-hour fastball over this part of the plate.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it like that, and I think that it's. So we've spoken in the past about how I think it's important for technology executives to understand technology.
Sure, absolutely.
Which seems like that should be a given, because you want your CFO to understand accounting, for example.
Yeah.
But it's not. But they should have the basic understanding enough that they can judge whether the pitcher is doing a good job. And know whether to replace him, and know whether to say or go out to the mound to talk to him. I mean, they need to be able to. They need to have enough technical knowledge, and I think this is what they should do, to be able to judge the things brought to them, and to be able to make decisions.
Right.
And I've seen both. I've seen exactly what you're talking about: micromanaging executives who try to control the technology in the way they shouldn't, and I've also seen. I've seen this more often: executives that know nothing about that technology and trust someone underneath them who is doing a very bad job. I would say in most of the cases where I see Kubernetes done really wrong is that case, is that the executive doesn't have the knowledge, and he goes to someone in the company that's been there 20 years, enterprise VP of enterprise architecture, who doesn't know the new technology, and says, do this. And that's where I see the biggest mistakes. That's where I see you digging the hole. That's where I see the uncloud nativeness. I think that the best cases, and I can think of examples that I'm never sure if I'm allowed to mention companies here, but I can think of examples where they hired an expert and said, help us with this. And those have been the ones that I see work out the best.
Yeah. No, that your analogy of the I don't know anything about the baseball, but that I know enough. So that's a good sort of a model to a metaphor to apply in the sense of you should know what containers are and what capabilities they have and the advantages they have, and even know like what a Kubernetes is, like, just to narrow down to that. But, like, as far as knowing, like, all the differences between competing open source networking plugins versus the closed source ones versus, like, the type of storage that we're using here, or, like, if we're using this whatever technology we're using for circuit breakers, like, maybe you shouldn't really, like, proactively know that stuff unless you just, like, need to put yourself to sleep at night and you want to read up on it.
But you still shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
You still shouldn't.
Exactly. More importantly, you shouldn't meddle in it. You shouldn't micromanage in it. That's someone else's. It's some other people on your team, and your extended team of not just your direct reports, but to kind of make those decisions and work closely with that stuff rather
And
than
then
you.
what you should do is you should be able to look at that and then apply this overlay of business goals and
Yeah.
say, does this match?
Right.
Right. Is this, so I, as an executive, should know where the business is going and what our problems are and what the goal, what the thing we're trying to solve is. I should be able to line those things up in a way that the pure technologist in your organization underneath you can't do.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
probably can't do, right? They're in the weeds. They can't look up at the stars.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another, this is good because this is another thing I think for the mind shift book idea, which is something I struggle with all the time. But it's like all these things, as always, are like common sense when you explain them. There's some Mark Twain or Churchill thing about common sense, right? It wouldn't be called common sense if it was common or something. But like
That sounds like Mark Twain.
yeah. But like it's almost like part of what you were describing there, the decision process you have to go through, whether you are that person deciding the networking module. I don't know what you call it in Kubernetes, but the SDN that you're going to use from Kubernetes.
Service mesh.
Yeah, deciding on the exact one that you're going to do. Yeah. Or you're the executive who is making sure that all of this effort is delivering on your business goals, right? A guiding sort of principle in each of those is like, is the way I'm about to spend my time taking advantage of the position that I'm in and the capabilities that I have? Like, is this the best way for me to spend my time based on what my goals are, right? And so, for example, and this has been most of my career, if you're the person deciding on the networking layer you're going to use, and you spend 3 hours debating how you think the strategy of the company is all messed up, that's probably not a good use of your time, right? Because you're just sort of like, as we used to say, micturating into the wind, right? Like you just like, you're not really like, it's extremely delightful and it might lead to a long industrious career in being an industry analyst and a blogging pundit, like myself. But like, if your job is to go implement a pagination framework, like it's not a good use of time, right? You should just like not do that. Not conversely, but equally so, if you're an executive, a senior executive in an IT organization, hopefully, at least for your new job in 18 months that you take, because that's the only way to get a significant promotion and compensation raise. That could be another topic, why it's the case that companies don't just promote from within, but whatever. Hopefully you realize kind of the opposite of that you're unique. It's not assets that you have, but the stuff on the desk in front of you, the tools that you have, is you can go talk with the business people and spend time to understand not only what their needs are, but you can actually help them understand IT's capability and, align it better together. So if you're spending a lot of time worrying about like what SDN stuff you're using, that's not a good use of your time. Like it's not a good use of the almost the competitive advantages, but the advantages that you have, even though this is like, I think it's like the second fundamental economic law about how England should not make its own port and it's supposed to import it from Portugal, and England's supposed to send down fabric. It's Ricardo or something like that. But it's basically like, even if you're the second best, even if you're really good at doing SDN stuff, if your best talent is talking to the business, you should only do your best talent, right? Like you should apply all of your effort to that, achieving the goal, and then everything will kind of even out at the end. But I think that kind of like making sure I spend my time. See, I can't even phrase it because it's not at what I am best at, but I spend my time on what will have the biggest outcome for the goals that I currently have. And I struggle with that all the time. And I have a feeling that in most large organizations, people struggle with that too, right? Like they get distracted doing other things, or if you don't have a crisp goal, it's really confusing about how you should apply your efforts, right? And I don't know, that's a...
Or you might have conflicting personal and professional goals.
Yes.
I mean, that's another thing
you would have, as we like to say, misaligned incentives.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Well, there we go. Well, I think as always, I've got to go pick up my kids. Although I have more time than usual because, did I tell you we got one of those urban arrows, an electric buck feet. and
Ah.
it's one of these battery powered bikes. It has like 5 modes. It has no power, so you're pedaling on your own. So a buck feet is it's a bike that has a huge oblong bucket in the front, and there's usually a
It
chair.
can hold children or groceries or whatever you need.
Or
TV.
IKEA furniture, your Billy bookshelves, whatever. But it's got a big cargo thing in the front, and like all biking technology, it's very popular in Amsterdam and the Netherlands.
Well, it is the Rolls Royce. It is the luxury status symbol. In Amsterdam. If you have that, you've made it.
Yeah, and we got ours used, but boy, they retain their value. Like you do not get you don't get a discount on these things. But so I'm biking on that today. Somehow my kids always want to. The sky will be all blue like it is today, and in the morning my son will look up and be like, "Looks like it's gonna rain today. We should take the buckfeet," because he always wants to go on it. But I have a little bit more time because for some reason I took that today. But still. Anyways.
But have you used that explaining the buck feet now? Maybe.
Use what explaining it?
The time.
Oh, yes, probably. But it takes significantly less time to do that. And I've already bought them their snacks. You got to get them snacks after school. But I think there's more on cloud nativeness that we could have covered. But I think the summary of it, tell me if I get this right, is let me generalize it. And maybe this is something we should talk about next time, is there are new capabilities that with Kubernetes or with cloud native, you gain new capabilities that 1, allow you to do things differently, and 2, eliminate the need to do other things, the status quo of what you've been currently doing. And unless you revisit those things and instead you lift and shift your governance and your workloads, then the best you can hope for with installing Kubernetes is that it's cheaper. It's what's the other phrase? We know all these phrases in vendor land, and I'm sure on the other side it's your mess for less, right? Like you probably don't want a your mess for less situation, right? And so you should know what those capabilities you gain are and the things that it fixes, so that you can make sure that when you're doing your Kubernetes strategy, you take advantage of them so that you don't just have the lift and shift of your mess for less. And then, figuring out how to achieve those, it's really important to know the goal that you're going towards, right? Because maybe you don't even need to deploy it. Who cares, right? But if you don't have that pretty crisp goal of like what business reason you're trying to achieve these things, it's going to be very hard to actually achieve their capability, do anything worthwhile, because you're just going to be making stuff up. to kind of justify it. But I think, maybe, I don't know when we'll talk next, but next time we should talk, all right, so what are those capabilities you gain, and what are the things that you can stop doing?
Well, I would love to talk about what's the actual value you get from cloud native. And that helps you choose the things that you deploy and and not make the mistakes. That should be what we talk about next.
What's the actual value
you get from what cloud? We should do, since this is supposed to be, we should map those back to maybe Tanzu.
Sure.
And how Tanzu can help you. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because we talked a lot about cloud native, but we didn't tie it back enough. But I promise you it ties back.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially, I'm sure you, like everyone else, saw we have these 4 packagings of VMware Tanzu now. And I think it's a pretty good job of like explaining, like, across these 4 things, there's a set of narrow, in a good way, understandable goals that each of those packagings is trying to address. And it kind of helps kind of make a little clear what's going on there. But there's a good mapping between everything, especially if you watch like the 90-minute version explainers of these things. I mean, that's kind of it's a lot of detail, but it's that's kind of what launched you and me talking the last few times. Is I was realizing that, like, I think there's a lot of this cloud native stuff that is like too complicated because it's not detailed enough. Right? I forget if the funny way I put it is that, like, in order to like make this simple, I'm going to need a lot more complex explanations.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Simplicity requires complexity underneath it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's almost like, if you're going to have the simplicity of just the tip of the iceberg, someone's got to build the rest of the iceberg underneath the water. right? Like it has to exist, and you got to know about it. But we'll have to discuss that for next time. Well, as increasingly is always the case, this has been a simulcast of the Tanzu Talk podcast and also the Tanzu Talk TV live. We appreciate the viewer or two that we had, but there's always good pickup otherwise. If you want to, I think we have about 4 different shows that we do regularly throughout the week, from live coding to operations stuff to architectural talk to whatever it is I'm doing here. If you go to tanzu.tv, you can see all the archives that we have, and you can see the schedule, and you can go down to Twitch and subscribe to stuff to see the streams real. You can chat with us while you're doing it. It's nice. Or you can just subscribe to the podcast if you just search around for Tanzu Talk, and you can have those downloaded as much as you like. What I like to recommend to people is it really doesn't matter if you listen to them or not. That's a bonus. What matters is that you find all of the devices that can download a podcast that is under your control, and you subscribe to that podcast. As long as it's downloading the podcast, you're doing your job. And if you want to listen to it, that's great too. Enjoy. But if you've got kids, subscribe them to it. Tell Alexa to subscribe to it. Do it in Spotify. All over. Have your car subscribe to it. And that's all I ask. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.